Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. I thought we would have a look at the suggestions past the developers for September of 2024, and it's time to have a look at the ground stuff that has been passed. There's a bunch of weird ones in this one, including the Vespa, and also the FIAT 2000 surprisingly, and also some really interesting ones that would actually be pretty cool to see in the game. So, let's get into it. As always, if you enjoy this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. The first one is for America, and it is the M114A2. This is an interesting little vehicle, and it obviously starts its story with the M114. This was developed in the mid-1950s as a light counterpart to the M113. While the M113 was designed for general troop transport, the M114 was primarily intended for command and reconnaissance, as the name would imply. The M114 was much smaller and also lower profile than the 113, with an emphasis on speed over carrying capacity. Like the 113, the 4 was both amphibious and air transportable. It featured a 3-man crew, with a driver, commander gunner, and also observer. To enhance the firepower of the vehicle, a 2 or 3-man anti-tank team could be carried. However, the 114's small size meant the crew compartment was rather cramped, so this wasn't too common. It entered service in 1962, and in 1963, an improved version was developed featuring a fully enclosed M26 cupola instead of a simply open hatch, allowing the 50 cal primary armament to be fired from inside the vehicle while buttoned up. This version, designated the M114A1, quickly replaced the 114, and around 615 of all of the variants were produced. And in 1968, it was determined that the M114A1 was insufficiently armed. A new version, designated the M114A1E1, was developed featuring a 20mm HS-820 autocannon, which was designated the M139. This was on an M27 cupola. The M27 was identical to the late production hydraulic M26, except for its armament. The first 114A1E1 was produced in 1969, being standardized as the 114A2, and while this could still technically carry 2 or 3 passengers, the larger caliber of the primary armament's ammunition made the interior even more crowded, and therefore likely never happened. 50 of these were produced, seeing combat in Southeast Asia. Unfortunately for the 114A2, this was around the time that the Sheridan was entering service. With its excellent mobility and extremely powerful 152mm cannon, the Sheridan was simply much more effective than the 114. So beginning in 1969, they were phased out of active service, and despite the massively upgraded firepower of the A2 variant, it also proved too little too late and followed its brothers into the reserve service in 1972. The 114 and A1 were officially retired in 1973, with the A2 variant following in 1975. However, it wasn't until the early 1980s that the last vehicles were actually taken out of service. We also have a Boxer variant, which is the ARTEC GmbH Boxer A1, which is the Lockheed Martin 40mm modular turret version. The history of this intriguing Boxer mission module begins near the very inception of the Boxer program, back in 1996, when the United Kingdom decided to sign on as a joint producer of ARTEC GmbH's Boxer AFV. The Boxer represented a radical departure from previous vehicle design and was very much ahead of its time, being unmatched in its vehicle class for weight, protection, and also modularity. However, the UK decided that Boxer would not be worth pursuing, as they preferred to focus development on the FRES program and dropped out of the Boxer program in 2003. The history of the FRES program is long and well publicized. The important part, as it pertains to this vehicle, is that Lockheed Martin UK developed a turret housing the CTA-S 40mm autocannon, which was trialled and proven on the Warrior CSP. In fact, Lockheed Martin UK has been so involved in producing this component for the FRES program that they created a turret center of excellence following their long years of development and building up their Amt Hill facility. Naturally, this was an expensive endeavour, and like most developers, Lockheed Martin UK decided to pursue export ventures in a bid to recoup costs. In 2014, Lockheed Martin UK had used what appeared to be a unique mission module on a Boxer A1 hull to integrate Javelins with the Warrior CSP turret. With the Boxer being very successful in the Eurosphere, it was natural that the test rig, which was already shown its worth, would be refined and presented as a potential export option. Despite attempts to rouse interest in the export market with the previously mentioned Boxer, as well as the ubiquitous Patria AMV, it doesn't appear that Lockheed secured any sales in this department, with Boxer finally returning to the UK this year. It remains to be seen whether Lockheed Martin's UK experience in this department will bear any fruit. The major difference between this and other Boxer variants is that it uses the CTAS-40 40mm case telescoped automatic cannon. It also has access to the FGM-148 Javelin, which has 2 pods on the left or the right side of the turret. Technically, that means it could carry 4 of them if you wanted it to. We have another Type 74 for Japan, but this one's slightly different. It's the 105mm self-propelled howitzer variant. This development was driven by the need for both maneuverability and a fast firing rate to support frontline units. In contrast to the 155mm class, the 105mm howitzer offered easier ammunition supply and quicker position occupation, and also removal times. The decision was made to develop 2 configurations, a maneuverable 105mm self-propelled gun for direct support and a larger 155mm self-propelled gun for general support. The development began slightly earlier than the Type 75 self-propelled gun 155mm, with finalized specifications in 1966. It was commissioned for a research project in 1967 with Nippon Steel Corporation responsible for turret development. The chassis development, assigned to Komatsu Works, produced prototypes in 1970. The strategy likely involves starting with the smaller 105mm prototype before progressing to the larger 155 version. Limited manufacturers capable of large caliber artillery production, like Nippon Steel Corporation, led to a rational use of resources. Field trials were conducted in 1972, and the Type 74 was officially adopted in 1974. For China, we have the BK1990-105. This one looks really fun. When entering the 1990s, the PLA was going through a major shift in military doctrine and also equipment. Not only was technology from the Western world helping improve the PLA, but China itself had been working on new designs due to the influx of technology. Part of this doctrinal shift was a switch to faster and more light-wheeled vehicle types. For many years, China had relied on tanks such as the Type 59 to fill the anti-armor role, but developments like the WZ-141 program proved that light vehicles capable of airborne operations could work. As such, in the early 1990s, work began on a wheeled 6x6 or 8x8 APC family, and one of the 3 competitors was Factory 617, perhaps the most famous factory in China, responsible for numerous important tank developments, including production of the first Type 59s. Also included, though, was Factory 256, who had recently seen their WZ-551 design finalized and also accepted for production. The other competitor, China National Heavy Duty Truck Group, realized they lacked the production experience required for armored APCs the military required, and as such were eliminated from the program early on. Under the direction of chief designer Fang Weixiang, Factory 617, also known as the Inner Mongolia First Machinery Group Corporation, started by creating a 6x6 APC chassis, which had a much lower profile and also better driving characteristics than the WZ-551. This chassis would be combined with a turret housing a 105mm gun to create a vehicle named the BK1970. However, while the design was decent, an 8-wheel configuration was still considered more desirable. Improving further upon the BK1970 chassis, Factory 617 used a new type of transmission, as well as an independent suspension system and a number of new ideas in designing the chassis. This resulted in a more complex design, but also made it more spacious inside and gave it excellent driving performance. This hull was to be called the BK 1990. In 1999, both Factory 256 and 617 completed their designs, and at this stage, 617 had mounted the PK 1970s turret on the 1990s hull. 256 had opted to improve upon the WZ551 design. The following year, each factory's vehicles were evaluated, and 617's BK 1990 design was chosen as the superior option, owing to its advanced technological usage, lower profile, superior driving characteristics, and ability to mount large guns, such as the 105mm, as well as the capability to mount a 120mm. In the end, neither team's designs would be adopted, but the BK 1990 was very important, as it would later be developed into the VN1 and also the VN2 series of export vehicles, and the experience itself would pave the way for China's later wheeled assault vehicles, most notably the ZTL-11. For Italy, we have the huge Fiat 2000. The story of this vehicle began when Italy was able to obtain samples of the French Schneider CA and also the Renault FT, and could fully understand the effectiveness of the tank back in the First World War. In late 1915, Major General Giulio Martini ordered the Fiat company to start the research of what would become the Fiat 2000. When the design was finished, the official contract was called Automobile Blindata d'Assalto Tipo 2000, also called the Mobile Fortress, which we know as the Fiat 2000. The design was a 40-ton armored vehicle with a 65mm main gun on the roof, with machine guns on the sides. During the development of the tank, there was a lot of drama between the company Fiat and Ansaldo, since Ansaldo didn't have the army contract and they were the ones creating the armored plates for the Fiat machine. The layout was simple and effective. The lower end served the transmission, running gear, and the engine, while the upper part served the crew department. However, the extreme size of the tanks was considered too large for combat in the mountains of the Alps, so it was decided not to send them to the front there. But its combat debut would be in Libya, where it was sent to fight rebels. Imagine if you're a rebel and you just run into this thing. The tank was almost used for study and parades after the war, and it received an upgrade in 1934, where there was installed two 37mm L40 anti-tank guns, while keeping the 65mm howitzer in the dome turret. But when World War II began, the tank was scrapped, and it's believed the reason was to salvage parts for the war effort. The vehicle itself is a modern monolith, and it used a Fiat A12 6-cylinder 250 horsepower engine, and this gave it a wonderful top speed of 7.5 kilometers an hour. The armor of the tank as well, in its beefiest parts, was only 20mm. There's also another wonderful vehicle that was passed, the anti-tank Vespa, which is the Vespa 150 TAP, or the Troops Aero Paracadutate, probably, or the Troops Aeroporte in French. This is a military anti-tank scooter manufactured by Piaggio and marketed under the Vespa brand name. The scooter was ordered from Piaggio by the French Ministry of Defense. The Vespa 150 TAP was first introduced at the 33rd Milan Motor Show in December 1955, and production of it began in January of 56 in the factories of the French subsidiary ACMA, which is the Atelier de Construction de Motorcycle et Automobile, which was already producing the Vespa under license for the Transalpine market. By 1959, approximately 600 units of the Vespa had been produced. Changes from the civilian Vespa included a reinforced frame and an American M20 recoilless gun mounted on the scooter. The recoil was compensated for by venting the propellant gases at the rear of the gun, eliminating the need for a mechanical recoil system. The rollers were parachuted in pairs with a team of two. Lacking any aiming devices, the recoilless gun was not designed to be fired from the scooter. The gun was mounted on a Browning M1917 machine gun mount, which was also carried on the scooter. However, in an emergency, it could technically be fired while in the frame while the scooter was moving. The Vespas were produced in two versions, the TAP 56 and also the 59. Both versions had a 150cc engine, and only the Vespa TAP pre-series or prototypes were equipped with the engine of the 125cc civil version, depending on the year of its commissioning, and therefore, to distinguish between them, the handlebar of the 56 is rotated 90%, so it's in the saddle axis, and then on the 59, on the other hand, the handlebars cannot be rotated as much, which cause problems when parachuting. The vehicle itself is one of those that I feel like a lot of people have talked about in War Thunder to add to the game, but has never really made it, but hopefully one day it can turn up. For Sweden, we have another STRF. This is the Stridsvården 9025. This was the first development of the CV90 family, and it had been planned to be in service alongside the STRF 9040 in the Swedish Army. It was built and tested much before them, in 1986. The 9025 had a similar layout to the STRF 9040 because both vehicles were basically designed in parallel to be the new Swedish IFV. The 25 in its name comes from the armament, which is a 25mm M242 Bushmaster autocannon. The turret also features the same type of design and electronics as the STRF 9040, and the gun allowed it to carry more ammunition than the 40mm from the 9040, but pretty much everything else is the same on the vehicle. For Israel, we have another SPAA. This is the Zachlad TCM Mark III, or the ZU-23. Based on experience in the design, development, and also production of the TCM-20 twin 20mm anti-aircraft system, Ramta structure, and also systems, expanded the TCM-20 project to include the TCM Mark III, which was fitted with two 23mm 2A14 cannons. To test and also promote the new system, they installed it on the Zachlad hull. The system was first announced in 1983 and claimed to have been in service and production since 1984, but unfortunately there doesn't seem to be a lot of evidence of that existing. So what you're getting here is pretty much a TCM-20, but has access to the 23mm that you know from the BTR-ZD. So a lot higher firepower, a lot higher velocity, and a little bit more fun. That is all of the ground vehicles passed to the developers for September of 2024. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shea, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem, Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.